Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Shovel Knight King of Cards. In the last part we continued on the second chunk of the game, getting through the Hall of Joustus here, and now we're in Bohto's Big Bounce, one of my least favorite levels in the game. This level's focus is the eponymous Bohto, who we've seen since the original Shovel Knight campaign. It's the big beetle we can bounce on. Now, this beetle itself isn't so bad. It's what they do with it in this specific level that I really don't like, because unlike the prior levels, this time the beetle slowly accelerates to the point where it'll actually outrun the scrolling speed of the screen. So what you need to do is actually wait for it to come back as the screen scrolls, and that can make it just absurdly tight feeling. Partner that with already King Knight's more rigid attack movements and all that, it's very easy to accidentally fall into the lava multiple times in this level and just take some very silly feeling deaths, even if they're ultimately not super your fault, albeit they are still ultimately, considering how well these games control. Not a fan of this level, just historically haven't been since I first played over half a decade ago. It's still weird to think about how it's been that long since this campaign, but oh well. Jump up here, we can find ourselves not only our next merit medal, but also, I forget if this is our first mimic or not, but this is the mimic treasure chest that you can actually get a lot more money from if you actively hit them as many times as you can. And the dueling glove is actually very effective against them for that. In that regard, King Knight actually deals with those enemies the easiest out of all of the playable characters. Just be careful about how you end up placing yourself, because otherwise you might have issues getting back up out of that room. Also, I believe that block I just missed contains only a turkey, so that's just a healing item if you need it. This level also makes pretty good advantage of the birder enemy type we've seen since the original campaign. That's a big send up to Bubbles from Zelda, specifically Zelda 2. Because since they only bounce off of the edges of the screen and not the edges of anything else, it's very easy to get overcrowded. This is what I'm talking about though. Now, the scrolling speed's already fast, but we gotta wait for Bohto to come back to us while dealing with enemies. I don't like the way this feels. I just historically haven't. It's not even a thing of like friction. I think they just expect too much out of you in this stage too quickly, because there's only really, I think, the 2 times you're on Bohto. If they had split this level's difficulty into like 3 Bohto scrolling sections, I wouldn't mind this nearly as much, because then they could be a little bit more of a gradual crawl up to this. Also, I still love this song. Mind you, the Shovel Knight soundtrack, I think, is one of the most perfect chiptune soundtracks in existence. Now that I think about it, what has Jake Kaufman even been up to the past little bit? Because I know he did Shantae 4, and then he was on Cyber Shadow a few years later. I think he was on Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon and Dig. What has he been up to since then? Googling. Alright, he did an arrangement for Shredder's Revenge, which I completely forgot about because it was in an update, so I probably didn't play that. Okay, and he's also on Mina the Hollower. That makes sense. So that means I can really look forward to Mina the Hollower soundtrack, which I was already kind of doing anyway, because that brief demo they showcased looked incredible as it was. For right now, we're going to distract ourselves from the Lost City levels to go start off the Iron Whale stages, which I really like. I've already talked about over the years that I actually really like water levels in a Mega Man adjacent context, because the decreased gravity leads to some pretty fun jumps you can make. But between the scepter we got last time and King Knight's moveset, you can do some really fun flippy, twirly madness in these stages. Plus, like you can see there, you can just really skip past that section. If you're super fast, you can actually get through that with it only raising and lowering once. But for recording's sake, I didn't want to make an embarrassing screw up multiple times in a row, so I erred on not doing that. I guess on that note, worth noting, the way I handled this LP, as usual for a lot of my LPs, for most of the channel's existence at this point, it feels like, I recorded more or less each level individually, but in the case I was feeling good about it, I would do multiple in a row, because I would usually practice multiple in a row and then just record them one at a time. I think like I did this stage, the prior stage, and the next stage all at once in practice, and then just recorded them all one at a time in case something went horribly wrong. Again, that's mostly just for simplicity's sake when it comes to editing and not losing anything when it comes to footage. Big thing with this level is we got the boss bass adjacent fish from the earlier versions of this level, which is completely invincible. There's no way you can actually take that out, but if you're careful about avoiding it, we can get that ring out of there and access the alternate exit for this stage. This alternate exit is entirely based on that fish, but now we're pretty much entirely submerged underwater, So you need to kind of overshoot your platforms to try and go it one direction or another to avoid damage as best you can. Pretty easy to do because compared to other versions of this fish in games that are instant kill especially, it does move pretty slowly and you can shoulder charge it and pogo off of it to avoid damage completely. But that's not going to be exactly helpful in some cases when you need to go a little lower, like coming up here, so be careful. Using the scepter can help you avoid some of this section, but doing it right here especially can be kind of scary, as you're probably going to fall in the bottomless pit, in my experience. On that note, I should note, largely if you use the scepter and are above something, you'll fall down to that something, unless it's water, in which case that will stop you. Otherwise, you'll just fall down to a bottomless pit if you use it over that, for instance. And in here, we got a gold chest that's just a gigantic gem pile underwater. No other specialties here, it's just a bunch of gems. I think they wanted to make that cool drilling animation go off, because it is pretty nice. Also worth noting, in the case you're watching along and the screen shaking is making you a little bit nauseous, I believe for this campaign specifically even, they do have a way for you to turn off the screen shake, which I appreciate, even though I don't get super motion sick by games doing stuff like that, at least. Back at the exit split, though, it's time for us to move on to the main exit, which is largely mechanically pretty much the same as the previous exit, just that now there's more open area you can use to use the scepter on and all that to avoid the fish and all that. Not a bad place to use the scepter once again, I just often forget to, plus this platform, for instance, is so high, it's going to be rough to do so otherwise. The merit medal coming up here, there's a couple ways you can access. I like to just use the gold armor adjacent enemy that's over here to break the dirt after getting this chest and then go down there and then jump back up, but as you can see, there's a couple routes you can use to take this. It really just depends on what you're most comfortable with. Now, getting a good bit ahead of ourselves here. If you're having trouble getting certain merit medals in certain stages, don't worry too much about it. You can leave a surprising amount behind in levels as you go and still be able to get every upgrade. Out of the 135, I believe there are 26 that you don't need to get any upgrades. You still get an achievement as well as an aesthetic thing for getting all 135. But if you're just trying to, say, get every sub-weapon, every vigor upgrade, and things like that, don't worry too much. Just get what you can along the way, and then maybe go back to clean up later. That kind of mentality can help a lot in games like this, I've learned over the years. In the case you're having trouble with a specific level, just leave it be, come back later, maybe go take a nap and do all that, do something else for a little bit, as that can really help in my experience. Our next level is the Deep Sea Trench. This is the last of the notable Iron Whale levels, and it's overall the most waterlogged, as a majority of it is completely underwater. The name of the level would imply that it's largely a vertically structured level as well, and there is quite a bit of vertical structure to this level, but there's going to be some horizontal sections in there as well. With that said, I like this level a lot because generally, as I brought up before, I really like water levels in Mega Man adjacent games because I like how the controls feel. Notable things they like to play with in underwater levels like this kind of don't exactly apply all the way with King Knight though, as while you say get some extra horizontal distance using the shoulder charge and the twirl especially from that. The shoulder charge itself doesn't get any extra distance underwater, so you need to actually keep in mind this usual rules with it. Unlike, say, Shovel Knight, Plague Knight, or Spectre Knight, who have notably a pretty easy to access ability that lets you get a lot of extra height really quickly here. Also, you do need to use the tentacles to reach the area ring up there to get one of the merit medals, but thankfully, enemies like this will respawn just upon exiting and re-entering the screen. Which, honestly, I've never actually tried. I think you can go back to a lot of screens in the game. I just seldom ever have a reason to once I'm done with them. There are, of course, exceptions, like if you just go down a large ladder that drops off and you don't have a way back up there and all that, but oh well. On that note, I should note, and this hasn't really come up as much in the other playthroughs, if you miss an item in a level in any of the Shovel Knight campaigns, and you have to go back in to get it, like the merit medals, the red skulls, cipher coins, all that jazz, you do actively have to grab them and then finish the level, because if you try to go back to the level select after you get the item, it won't save. You do need to clear the level. And in that regard, King Knight actually has the best setup, as missing even a merit medal at the start of the stage isn't too bad given the relatively shorter stage length. Hell, especially if it's a level that has a secondary exit, you usually have a pretty quick way to get to the end of a level. Oh, we're already at the end of the level. That was pretty short. We're seemingly missing a merit medal, but I probably just missed it along the way. Oh no, it's the anglerfish enemy. Now, this thing was a mini-boss in the other campaigns, and it is going to be so here as well, but we need to survive a relatively long vertical scrolling segment at first. If there's a platform just off-screen, you can land on it, but if you go too low, you do end up dying, so you need to be careful here. You can always tell when there's a platform coming by looking at the seaweed in the background. If there's seaweed, you can largely jump there. Once you reach the center at the bottom, we become the usual boss fight against this thing, but instead of having a treasure chest for us to target, it has a target that alternates between being on the front of the fish or on top of the ring. You can just combo this by doing a shoulder charge into a twirl jump on top, into another shoulder charge and all that. With that said, the rat bombardier can also hit that thing twice at once if you're very good about placing it. Not exactly a hard fight, but it can surprise you if you're not expecting it, honestly. And that's already the end of the stage. Oh god, the eel surprises. With that said, we're mostly done with the aesthetics used for Iron Whale at this point in the playthrough, except for a gem level that's about to pop up, because I think the gem levels tend to show up after you clear everything of a certain aesthetic. And in this case, we're actually going to deal with a mechanic we didn't deal with in the other levels up to this point, the anchors from near the end of Treasure Knight's stage. When you get too close, they drop down just like usual. These aren't too scary as long as you remember to use the bubble frog, because in the case they drop down to a bottomless pit, you have a very easy way around them at that point. With that said, this being a gem level, it is mostly for money, though it has a few more hidden secrets than the usual ones, including a Decree of Destruction, which we actually saw back in the Grand Hall, the final level of Pridemore Keep back in the last chunk of the map. That summons one of the griffins to rain down attacks for a little bit. Worth noting, you can only hold up to 2 decrees at any given time. And for right now, that kind of sucks because we don't have a way to make them at will, but we'll have one way to do that eventually, and it will come in pretty good handy. I find the first 2 decree types, the types we've seen up to this point, to be much more useful than the third type. But that's because the third type also is kind of redundant because there's an armor that does a very similar thing. I just haven't gotten it yet because I'm saving my money for other things at this point, I believe. I think. It's been like a week since I recorded this specific footage, so I don't exactly know. Oh, that's an overshooting. That's where the danger of the relative rigidness and set distance of the shoulder bash can really come into play. Thankfully, in the case you die in a place like this, hey, get this, the horns of heralding can come in real handy. Oh, that is a different looking anchor. What's that got? Oh, hello. Going up, I guess? Oh, hi there. Curses! That fish had drawn near. I waited for hours. You scared away with that gilded get-up. Gilded indeed, workman. Have you no respect for your betters? You found royalty! I respect only one thing, and that's wealth. But you appear to be wearing most of yours. Thank you! The trick with gold polish, you see, is small clockwise circles with a soft brush. I'll bear that in mind as I toss it in the vault. And you overboard with the other worthless trash. So while King Knight's obviously being played and Spectre Knight was effectively the tutorial boss, the rest of the Order of No Quarter from Shovel of Hope are still in the game, however they're not at the end of their stages, technically. Instead, they're now moved to being the spots of wandering travelers like Reese, like the Phantom Striker in the main campaigns like Baz. And they usually unlock after clearing all the levels that belong to their usual aesthetic. For instance, for clearing all the Iron Whale levels, this shows up so you can battle Treasure Knight, whose pattern is largely the same it was in the other campaigns, though the way the twirl works alongside the shoulder charge makes taking care of him a lot easier, especially during this treasure chest phase. Although it's very easy to accidentally get bumped back too far from him and thus end up in the treasure chest and taking damage and also losing some money. Ultimately, not a very hard fight at the same time as long as you've done good about upgrading your health up to this point. And like with the Phantom Striker and Baz, beating Treasure Knight now will put him at the dinner table at the top floor of the Glide Wing, so he can duel him in Joustus to get some of his cards. But before we do that, let's head over here to the Volcanic Vault and get our next sub-weapon. The Lost City is a scoundrel's paradise, alright. But I'm so settled with loop I can't climb out. Tell you what, if I share my best plunder, maybe we can both gallop out of here. Here we get the Scorching Saber, spin through the air in a vortex of flames. This is an interesting sub-weapon, both for combat and utility. Maybe at the other side. Oh, and you can't shoulder bash in here. Use the Scorching Saber I just gave you. So when you use the Scorching Saber, you effectively do a second jump on top of wherever you are when you use it. On top of that, you of course do the Spinning Slash, quite like the Coenzon from Mega Man X4, before slamming down and causing a little bit of fire shockwave in front of you. So this is a very effective weapon for coverage on effectively all bound. It can be useful for platforming, it can be useful for enemies above you and around you, and it can also do a lot of damage to things on the floor. Plus, it can be used to break dirt blocks and all that, so this can be a very useful sub-weapon. Not one I use all the time, if only because when it comes to platforming, I'd rather use, say, the Bubble Frog to more safely traverse bottomless pits, or the Saber to just move faster along the ground, but in some circumstances, this can be a favorite in my experience. I think I used this a lot more in my first playthrough than I did on any of my respective playthroughs since. Which makes sense, because I was probably relying more on the secondary jump from this. Helps that this works as a jump without you having to worry about going into a twirling state, so if you're trying to avoid triggering certain effects or hitting certain blocks, you can use that to do that. Oh, topside air. Horses and caves are never mixed well. That your airship? Mind if I hitch a ride? You know, you're on thin ice. One more of those jokes and you have to hoof it. Oh, wait, shit. Ah, man, damn it. So now that we have Barton on the ship, of course, we have another Justice duel we can do. Before we do that, I want to go over here and talk to Doe to get more of his story. Cap was never the best with taking direction. Always gotta be at the top of the pecking order. That chicken's the salt in our stock, but in some situations only a cocky dude'll do. I can't believe that old Raptor still grabs the wheel for me when things get hot. Anyway, that's enough for now. Let's look to the horizon ahead. Next up, as we saw, the Bard is cheering, so we once again have another 10 merit medals. Let's see what this limerick is. Him. As the deep sea lay dormant, dark truth swirled away, and all of our accidents sunk in the bay. And legions and legacies cried in the sand, the merciless ocean had met its demand. Don't mess with the ocean. Ocean's scary. Worth noting at this point, the Saber is one of the last sub-weapons in the game, one of the last heirlooms. So if you've been saving your merit medals to prioritize those over getting extra vigor from Mom, at this point you can start calming down on that and actively start increasing your MP count effectively, because at that point you'll be able to use all of your sub-weapons to much greater effect. Plus at this point I'm going to get another armor from King Pridemore, in this case the Vestments of Vigor, which as you damage enemies will cause them to drop more vigor to begin with, so if you're like using your sub-weapons a lot, this is arguably the best armor in the game. I just prefer the platforming utility of the Brigandine myself. With that said, honestly, on a first playthrough, I'd recommend swapping to that other armor for the final boss or boss fights in general, as they can really save your ass getting extra vigor whenever you can like that. As you can see over there, Treasure Knight's also here, so we're about to get a double dose of Joustus duels up in here. With that said, I'd recommend getting the money first from Barton. Oh, the life. Thanks again for your help. I've got more gold than I can carry, so let me kick you some. Before we go after the duels themselves, though, I'm once again going to go buy some more cheats from Chester. I really recommend in general the Gem Thief, only because I think it's the best value for your buck. Because the extra 100 gold to play all 3 cards is nice, but there's ultimately more situations where the enemy not being able to play any more cards because you've taken theirs from them effectively is just much better as an option. What makes Barton a surprisingly confident duelist is, for one thing, most of his cards have strength of 2 on basically all arrows. But also he has several cards that end up swapping their direction pretty frequently, and with the amount of times you can push them around, it's easy to lose track of what's going to be what as you move things around. Treasure Knight, on the other hand, this one can be rough. As if this ship would be seaworthy. Dry lungs indeed. Sailing the skies, what folly. Perhaps playing Joustus will distract from the poor atmosphere. Treasure Knight, of course, uses a lot of the aquatic-themed enemy cards. But what makes him pretty rough is that he has a much smaller than usual arena, but also a much higher gem count than usual, so it's very easy to have him just accidentally take a lead and you not notice. Plus, there's only so many options for you to play cards. This is actually a game where using, say, the Phantom Striker card can come in handy, because you can just place that into a graveyard slot and then play a Gem Thief card from there after he plays another card to potentially take a lead. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in Part 8, we're going to continue on here in the second chunk of the game. See you guys then.